Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. John Laspina is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his appearances on episode 575, 582, and episode 606 of Boundless Body Radio. John Laspina is a 58-year-old retired middle school teacher of 34 years. John taught language arts, social studies, civics, and video production. John is a perpetual student, and most of his nutrition education comes from experts in the field of low carbohydrate nutrition. He became fat adapted about 5 years ago when he started eating ketogenic. Currently, he identifies as a carnivore and claims to have never felt more alive or more healthy. His amazing YouTube videos serve the purpose of informing and educating viewers about the proper way of eating real, whole foods and the potential benefits that can be experienced through this approach. John encourages viewers to leave comments and questions, assuring them that he will respond to everyone. John creates these YouTube videos for free, offering them to anyone who wants to learn, as he believes knowledge is power. His ultimate goal is to help individuals become the optimized versions of themselves by learning to eat well in order to feel and look well. John Laspina, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. It's wonderful to be back. It's been a while, and I'm excited to be here.
It has been a while, man. We did
Yeah.
3 episodes in quick succession. I loved the last one that we did, where we provided some really good, helpful, practical tips for people if they wanted to do a carnivore diet. Since that time, we've been able to meet in person, which was amazing at the awesome Hack Your Health conference, which I want to talk to you about today. But first of all, man, at the time of this recording, I cannot even believe what you guys are going through. You are in Florida. You just got hit with a major hurricane, all kinds of crazy flooding. I still have not heard details from the ground from one of my clients who lives in St. Petersburg, but I know that she is looking for a house to rent because their house is some level of destroyed. Again, we haven't been training, so I don't know. And now you guys are squarely lined up for another hurricane. I can't even believe it. What's the status as of now in Florida?
It's crazy. This one's called Hurricane Milton. It's already a Category 2. As of Monday, it's supposed to be almost a Category 4, like just a few miles per hour short of a 4 on Wednesday, late Wednesday, when it hits around the Tampa area and scoot up. And of course, we're constantly staring at the spaghetti models and down in, I mean, we are in hurricane mode in Florida. Everybody's rushing to the stores, buying batteries and water and flashlights and getting gas for their generators. I have my generator ready to go. We also bought trash bags, really thick, heavy trash bags that we're going to fill with water and tie at the top to use like a sandbag to put in front of our doors and our sliders, because we have had so much flooding. We've had so much rain. It's raining now. It's been raining all day yesterday, day before, and weeks before. We had so much rain that it's saturated. Our roads right now are flooded, and it's starting to come up my driveway. So we're fearful that by the time Wednesday and Thursday come, that it may come into the house. I've never had this before in my life where I'm afraid of actual flooding. And so, yeah, we're kind of getting ready to lose power and God forbid, protect our house from flooding. Thankfully, I have flood insurance, but I don't care. This is pretty bad. I've been through a lot of hurricanes, but this one's going to be bad. Now, I'm south of where it's hitting, so we're going to get the dirty side, the wet side. We're not going to have a lot of wind damage, but we're going to get a lot of water because there's no place for the water to go. So that's my update. And West Boca Raton. Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy. How do you decide whether to ride a hurricane out or whether you need to evacuate?
Where we live, I'm about 5 miles, as the crow flies, from the ocean. And that's on the east side. Now, this hurricane's coming from the west side, so it's coming the other direction. And we're many, many miles away from the Gulf of Mexico. If it's a Cat 5 and it's a direct hit, or even a 4, we evacuate because it doesn't look good. If it's a Category 2, 3, and it's kind of like we're in the path, but we're in the cone, we stay, we ride it out. People evacuate when they're really close to the water because that storm surge along with the wind is going to kill. It's bad. It's bad. So we're pretty safe. We're out west. My house is kind of nestled between everybody else's houses. We don't have a lot of room, so it protects everything. I have impact windows. It's a solid cinder block house. I mean, it's hardened, but it's still pretty scary,
Dude.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. Well, thank you for the update. God bless. Like, Man, yeah, I don't really know what else to say. That is quite scary. I mean, water, I mean, super powerful, right? Like there's
Yeah,
nothing you can
it
do
is.
if
Water's
it's
damage
already
is usually,
saturated.
yeah, it's the worst. It's the biggest danger of other than having your house blown apart. More people die in the flood aspect of it than the wind aspect of it.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's wild.
yeah.
Oh man. Well, like I said, God bless. Hope everything works out well and
Thank
that you
you.
guys dry out for sure. It's been a few months now. We got to meet in
Mhm.
person at the Hack Your Health conference, which was amazing. Meeting you was one of my highlights. So awesome to see you. You are every bit as kind and wonderful as you put yourself out to be in person as you are on your YouTube. What were some of the highlights of that conference for you?
Oh my
Again, it's
gosh.
been several months, but what were
Yeah, it
some of the
has
things that
been.
really stood out?
Well, my main highlight was meeting the amazing Casey Ruff. I mean, I got to
Oh
see you. I didn't,
man.
I'm standing in the front and you ran up to me. Seeing you in person is a little different than on the screen. Gave me the biggest, tightest hug ever. It was
Dude.
kind of cool. And then I watched you. You have an enormous amount of energy. You were just bopping around all over the place. I was filming. You were running away from me, pretending you were, I was chasing you. We
That's
had
right.
I wish we had more time. I know everybody had their little clique that they went to dinner with and they hung out. They went to some of the things with, and I saw in some of your videos, several videos that you went. You spent some time with different people. I'm like, oh, I wish I spent time with Casey, but I was with a bunch of other people doing restaurants and getting the beef and everything, and it was just wonderful. So next time, let's make a vow that we spend some time together.
Absolutely.
My favorite part of it was getting to meet the people I haven't seen in person. I got to meet them in person, like you. So many of my doctors and nutritionists that I learned from online, I got to meet them in person and spend time talking to them. It was so cool. Of course, I was selfish and I said, I have to get my selfie. Got my selfie with these famous people. I was on a high. I didn't want to leave to go back to the hotel when the day was over. I couldn't wait to get back there the next day and learn. And the talks were great. The booths were great. I already paid for next year's in Tampa, if Tampa's still there. My gosh.
Yeah, seriously.
Next November, I've already paid for my slot. I'm excited. So hopefully,
That's amazing.
are you going next November?
I am still a bit undecided. Florida is tough for me to travel to. It's not
Yeah, it's
prohibitive,
far.
but it is tough. It's far. Austin was a lot easier, one time zone. When I'm at these conferences, I still take my clients virtually, and so I'm doing virtual appointments, and so my schedule can be thrown off a little bit.
Yeah.
But I am still gonna definitely try to make it work. You're right, though. It's interesting. The Hack Your Health conference is so social. Pretty much everybody I've talked to and asked, like, what is your highlight of the conference? Was all the time we got to spend with like-minded people. There were lots of different people. Obviously, I think Carnivore still drives a lot of the primary interest. I'm sure you noticed that anything that was Carnivore was like really packed out, had lots of people there, different discussions, different booths that were Carnivore got a lot of attention. So that part was really fun. But I think the overwhelming majority of people kind of said what you said. And I have to agree, like hanging out with everybody,
Yeah.
seeing everybody, just the combined experience of so many people that are in ketosis is just electrifying. It's so fun.
It is. It's the your support group. And that's one of the things we tell anybody who's new to carnivore or low carb is don't do it by yourself. If you don't have anybody physically near you, your family or friends, you go online, you get the support online. That support is props you up. You feel confident that you're on the right track and you're doing the right thing because everybody else. And you can ask them questions, they ask you questions, you confirm your thoughts with them, and you're like, I am doing well because this person, we're all hundreds of people are doing the same thing, thousands. It's so exciting.
But it feels so isolating when you're back home in your own
Yeah,
silo and
yeah,
maybe in your own household people are not doing what you're doing or telling you
right.
your heart is going to explode or all these different things and you need fiber. Like it is really tough. So to have that experience, to go to a conference in person with everybody else, to feel that and have that support, I think is absolutely amazing. And Hack Your Health does such a great job of that.
They did, yeah. Mhm.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I'm really excited to get into our topic of discussion today. You are a wonderful teacher, the teacher I always wish that I had when I was going
Oh.
to school. So I'm excited to get into our topic. Before we do, like you said, it has been a minute. Can you remind us of how you got into this space?
Okay, trying another diet to lose weight, 35 pounds-ish overweight, had lower back pain. I was in my early 50s thinking, let me just try this new thing called keto. Didn't know what it was. Discovered very rapidly that this was making me feel well. I lost weight quickly. Then with YouTube and the internet, I just watched and learned, and one influencer led to another influencer, and I changed and tweaked and added concepts to my low carb eating, took out seed oils, stopped the keto snacks and treats, which I started with, which kind of weaned me off the sugar, which we'll get to later. I just got into this gradually, realized the more plants and non-animal things I had that I took out, I felt better and better and better, until eventually I became carnivore and thought I might as well just take out the last little bit, because this is just escalating to making me feel better and better. This January, it'll be about 2 years since I've been full carnivore. And I can't go back. I can't even imagine going back. Why would you want to go back and eat the foods that made you feel bad? That's more of a nutshell answer than I've ever given. Eating cleanly and eating from the animal kingdom is the way to go for all humans. Even though we're different and our body chemistries are different, everybody comes from a different background, we can all benefit from eliminating ultra-processed food, fast food, seed oils, carbs, and sugar.
Dude, I love that. That's amazing. Knowing you, we've gotten to chat several times, met in person, knowing you and your personality, I wonder if you're a bit like me, as we said in the introduction, like perpetual student, continual learner. Do you tend to get kind of obsessed with certain things that you learn about? Like if we talk about all the things that you taught in school, for example, like video production, language arts, do you tend to get a little bit obsessed with some of those topics as you're like learning about them?
Well, I'm a type A personality, which is,
Yeah.
and I am an introvert, which means I get my energy from within and other people drain me. I have had a little bit of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, with anything. I will fixate on sugar. I will fixate on anything that means a lot to me. Like when I'm trying to learn how to do something, it doesn't even have to be food related. Learning a new language, learning to play a musical instrument, I am 120% in, whereas most people are a lot less. So I do fixate.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I burn it out a little bit, and I kind of give it a break after I've overdone it. That's
Yeah.
my personality.
Very much like myself. Like in high school, I wanted to learn about photography, so I bought a manual camera, and I just obsessed about how to
Oh,
learn
all right.
photography and apertures and f-stops and all that stuff, until you're right, like you burn out, you stop. I ask you that question because this topic you don't ever really tend to burn out of. Like it's so
Right.
interesting when you start like learning about this stuff. I've been 5.5 years carnivore. I've been learning about ketogenic nutrition for 6.5, 7 years, and you never really reach that burnout. Is that a similar experience to what you're having, and is that different from other subjects you've studied in the past?
It's interesting. I thought, oh, I hope I don't get tired of this, because this is my health. This is my overall fitness and happiness, and I don't want this to become like one of those little hobbies that I started and stopped. And it isn't. I mean, it's proof, because I'm going on 6 total years of being low carb and 2 total years of being carnivore. So I know that it's not just something that I'm going to get. My family thinks or thought that, oh, there goes John again. He's going crazy. The pans and the pots and the cooking, and he's just like he was with all the other things he started. But hey, I've never done anything this long. It's different because it's connected to so many parts of who I am.
That's
The
amazing.
other things were just hobbies. This is life and health and fitness and sleep and happiness, and it all comes together. So I know it's permanent.
That's exactly why I wanted to ask you that question. It's definitely changed my life as well. And again, when you're in the mindset of ketosis and like your energy's better, you feel
Oh, yeah.
amazing. You're going to turn 60 in a year and change, I believe. Or are you still 58? I should have asked you before.
59 now.
You.
I turned
You're
59
59.
last July. Yeah.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, almost turning 60. I turned 40 this last year, and to feel better and have more energy than you did in your younger days is just absolutely wonderful.
It's
Um,
true.
Okay, so we put out a video recently that you watched. You generously watch a lot of our videos, so thank you so very much for that. I love that you leave comments and get to interact with you on YouTube, which is fantastic. But there was a particular video that you requested to be hosted back on the show again to talk about this topic. I'm so excited to chat about this with you. Why did you want to come back on our show this time?
As you said, I watch most of your videos that you put out because they're just amazing. Put my earbuds in my ears and I'm doing things. That's how I learn. I multitask. I'm an auditory learner. There's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and everybody has a different preference learning channel. I'm so much an auditory learner, which is rare. It just goes in. It goes into long-term memory. So when I learn things, I hear things, they stick. And this one episode that you had, you were talking to, I think it was several people, and it was about allulose and the wonderful benefits of allulose. And I had heard many talks about allulose from a lot of my respected nutritionists and doctors online. I bought a bag and I experimented with it. And I discovered a lot of interesting things I want to share with you to kind of counter, or not necessarily counter, but add on to some of the information that I felt was left out of that interview that you gave. They just went on and on about allulose, and they didn't talk about some of the other aspects of allulose that I haven't heard anybody talk about. And it kind of bothered me. It's like somebody needs to talk about some of these other things about allulose. That's why I wanted to come on.
John, that's just amazing. I'm so excited to jump into this with you. I am very skeptical of what we covered in that episode. I have so much respect for the people that we interviewed. Neil, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Calvo. Neil just completed 22 miles swimming in a loch in Scotland, completely fasted, taking on no calories, 12 hours. Incredible, really cool story. Dr. Richard Johnson, has so much respect for him. He's researched sugar and fructose for decades. Dr. Calvo, I was not as familiar with his work, but he's been working clinically with people, and they're all involved, we have to say, like, financially with a company that sells allulose, and we have to kind of keep that in mind. The message is like, this is a healthy sugar, which just, I have a tough time with that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about you and your experiment. Tell us about your experiment and why you wanted to try, with a bag of allulose. What made you decide to try that? And yeah, let's dive into some of the things that you personally learned.
Before I start, for the listening audience, a lot of people don't know this information, and knowledge is problem. This is the teacher in me. There's three major monosaccharides. There's glucose, there's fructose, and there's galactose. And you combine fructose with some of these and you get different sugars. You get the dairy sugar when you combine galactose and glucose. You get the sugar that's in honey and syrup and fruit when you combine fructose with glucose. Table sugar is 50% fructose and glucose, and so on. And it's the fructose part, or fructose, everybody pronounces it differently. It's the fructose part of any of these molecules that makes this part of the tongue taste the sweetness. And that sends the signal to the brain that something is sweet. And then the brain sends the signal to the pancreas and the liver, and then all these things start happening to get ready for the intake of sugar. So having that knowledge ahead of time before I talk is important, because when we eat something that has just glucose in it, like rice or bread, it doesn't really taste sweet on our palate. When we eat, I don't think they have anything with just galactose separated from it, but it's the sweet part, that darn fructose part, that kind of like turns on my addiction switch. So allulose is a rare sugar it's called an epimer of fructose, and it's almost like the right hand into the left hand. There's fructose, there's allulose, and there's a part of that molecule where it's exactly the same, but it's switched around, almost like a mirror. It has the same chemical formula, but the structure's a little tiny different, so it presents differently in the body. And this is what everybody's freaking out about. Oh, this is wonderful. Allulose does not cause tartar. Allulose does not cause glycation. Allulose, they're seeing in tests, does not do the same negative parts that fructose does, and yet it's sweet. And then another thing that allulose is supposed to do is actually does a lot of the things that the Ozempic and Wegovy type drugs are doing, the glucagon type peptide, the GLP-1. It actually stimulates a little bit of that in your gut. It makes you not want to eat anymore. All these fantastic benefits. So I bought a bag of D-allulose. They're selling them in the stores now. And one bag, I forget how many ounces, I think it was like $9. Pretty expensive. I tasted it. And my goodness, it was amazing on my palate. I'm like, this is great. So, what am I going to put it on? I don't eat desserts. I don't drink coffee anymore. It's like, what am I going to do? What I have is pork rinds. So I don't even eat pork rinds as a snack anymore. I put them in my bone broth soup as a crunchy thing, and I eat them with my meal. But what I did is I sprinkled allulose in an open bag of pork rinds, right? Shook the bag up so it was coated. And I felt like I was at the fair. I was eating deep fried dough that was sweetened. It was out of this world. I'm telling you, like a heroin addict, my brain lit up like I can't even explain.
Dude.
So, of course, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm just going to do a little bit after lunch and a little bit after dinner. And my brain took off and started bargaining with myself. And I kept buying bags of pork rinds because I said to myself, it's pork rinds, right? And I still had the bag of allulose. I put 2 tablespoons of that in there, shook it up. I was doing about a bag a day, in a serving. I think it's 4 or 5 servings per bag. I was doing a bag a day. I couldn't stop. And then I realized I was starting to put on weight. I was starting to feel the way I felt when I ate sugar, and it was starting to dominate my life. And I realized, when I was honest with myself, I'm addicted to this sweet taste. Even though it has none of the characteristics of sugar or fructose, it's this miracle thing called allulose. I attest, in my N=1 experiment, it flipped my addiction switch, just like any of the other sweet things. No one talks about the addiction aspect of allulose. They're talking about all the benefits of allulose. At Low Carb USA, not the one that you went to recently, but the one that I went to before that in January, I met Dom D'Agostino, and he did a whole talk on allulose and how wonderful it was. I think maybe he was sponsoring a particular brand. And I went up to him and I asked him personally. I got to speak with him, and I asked him questions, does it glycate like fructose does? Does the liver start to get fatty in the same way that it does when you're having too much fructose or alcohol? And he said no. And all these positive things about allulose. So I still had questions way back then until I got to your video. And I heard all these other wonderful things. And Ben Bickman talks about it. And Nick did a whole thing on allulose and how wonderful it is. But nobody's talking about this addictive characteristic to something sweet on the palate. It happens. And I think maybe your audience understands what cephalic phase insulin response is. I'm almost positive my body shot out a lot of insulin to prepare for something sweet. I wanted to put that out there and talk a little bit about that and ask you too. I think you have a sugar addiction too. Have you tried this with allulose?
I have not.
Don't.
I think wouldn't it be very similar to like a smoker who quit smoking and then like 6 months later you offer that person a cigarette and they don't even like want to go there. They don't even want to like touch it anymore because it's like I know what I do in the presence of sugar. I don't stop. I can't stop myself. So once I got away from it and avoided it, anytime I've tried to play with it, it's just not worth even playing with. And so to abstain is so much easier. So I have not tried it. They've given me their products before, and I just again, I don't know if I would have a problem with it because I've never tried it. And it's a very small sample size of people that I know that have tried allulose. It's not many. I know all these experts. I have so much respect for all of them. Ben Bickman, Dom D'Agostino, amazing, like amazing dudes. The people that I've talked to who have tried it on the ground are like yourself. Like it doesn't work with an addict's brain. Again, it's a very small sample size of people that I know who've tried it, but the people that have tried it have said it didn't work out very well for them.
I heard, I don't know if it was from your video or another one, somebody very quickly brought it up and said, oh, if you have an addiction sense to this, you're an outlier. So I guess I'm an outlier. I'm trying to find out how many outliers there are. It's something sweet. Monk fruit, stevia, erythritol, it does the same thing to that sweet part of the tongue. It sends the same signal, and my brain lights up like a Christmas tree. I get excited. I smile. I'm like, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing I've ever had in my life. And I have to rationalize and say, wait a minute. What are you sensing? What is this? This is just the chemical. This is shooting up your brain. in the same way that a drug addict does. Just like you said with smoking, if somebody gets their little hit of nicotine, maybe in a patch or a lozenge or vaping, they're going to get back to that addiction too. Just if an alcoholic knows they should not have a drop of alcohol because they have an addiction to it, they have a problem with it, as soon as they have a little bit, it changes their personality in their brain. They will do everything they can to get at it. And I'm telling you, this is powerful. It's almost like this little demon inside of you, this little monster starts talking to you, almost like a schizophrenic. You can have it. Oh, it's good for you. Nick Norwitz says it's good for you. This person said it's okay. Oh, I heard about it on this interview. You can finally have your sugar and eat it too. The brain just does that, and you have to realize, oh my gosh, what is going on in my head? That's addiction. Addiction is you can't stop doing something that is harmful to you. And the harm to me was I couldn't stop, and I kept doing it. I couldn't wait to have my first meal of the day so that I could get to that sweet part. That's hurry up and eat my meal so I can have my sugar.
Wow.
My allulose.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Interesting. Well, you made a good point there about outliers and how many of us are truly outliers. And one of the things I commented in that episode is that, like, since I'm a carnivore coach and you've been on the carnivore diet for several years, is it just that we're self-selecting? We're finding all the people that are outliers, and it's a minority of people that are doing the carnivore diet. So it's also a minority of people are sugar addicts. Or is it the way that one of my other podcast guests said recently, that like way more people are addicts that don't know that they're addicts and would do way better abstaining if they knew to abstain, had, not only the knowledge, but the ability, the willpower to be able to abstain to that? How many people are outliers? What's your hunch? Do you think it's the minority of the population out there that finally found the carnivore diet? Or is it all of the people that you see in Costco that are, not in very good health?
We don't really technically know unless we do a study, an absolute study, and test it and come out with numbers. But my guess is that I'm being honest with myself and realizing I cannot moderate, that I am an abstainer. And I think if more people were honest with themselves, they would admit that they don't have control over this when they eat it. But a lot of people will justify and bargain, and they're not honest with themselves. It's a slippery slope. It will lead back to sugar. It will lead back to overeating. It will lead back to things that are not healthy. I'm in the space. I'm constantly watching videos, so I keep it to the top of my brain. So I'm aware. Some people are they're in a fog. They're in a fog of their own eating, their own making. Not that they're not honest with themselves because they're dishonest. They don't realize it. Just like when we had brain fog, you don't know you're in brain fog until you're out of brain fog, right?
That's a really, really good point. I like that. You mentioned the cephalic phase of insulin, which is something that I learned about for the first time reading Gary Taub's amazing book, The Case for Keto. Can you explain what that is? I asked these gentlemen the same question about the cephalic phase of insulin and the sweet taste, like just getting anything sweet and what that generates. To them, I recall that they didn't really seem to think that allulose was going to cause any type of effect. And they also mentioned that it had a lowering effect on insulin, which was also quite surprising. So would you be able to explain the cephalic phase of insulin and what your experience was as far as allulose went?
Supposedly, it does lower sugar in the body. And supposedly it does all these wonderful things. That's why they kept raving about it. My understanding of what the cephalic phase insulin response is, it's not just the taste of something sweet. Your body is anticipating that it's going to get either sugar or protein, usually, a sugar or carbohydrate. It could be you smell Cinnabon in the mall. It could be that you hear something that your brain connects with food and your body starts thinking food's coming. So it could be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be a taste. It's the body anticipating that carbohydrates are coming in. And so it's the brain sends the signal and the insulin starts to churn to get ready to handle the incoming carbohydrates and sugar. I hear that it doesn't happen to some. Again, I don't know where the studies are. I know it happens to me. And I know I could probably prove that it happens to me if I wore a continuous glucose monitor or if I did an insulin test, which is hard to get. But the cephalic phase is that you're not getting actual sugar, but your body is getting ready for it and it secretes insulin anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So the way it was explained in the case for keto, you mentioned Cinnabon in the mall. I think that's a wonderful example. You and I have stepped away from carbohydrates. We've kept them out to the point that I would argue they're far less tempting than they used to be. I don't really care about them that much anymore. I don't miss them that much. So the idea is you and I could probably walk through a mall, smell Cinnabon, and be like, yeah, that's Cinnabon, and it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't like throw off our lives. Where somebody who's a little bit more insulin resistant might smell Cinnabon, and that kind of the craving or the smell, that the signal that sugar is incoming is so powerful to them that they might not have the choice to give into temptation. And then we might look at the person and say, oh, look at that guy, super unhealthy, eating Cinnabon. It's his fault that he's eating all this sugar, when in reality, it's the hormones that are driving that behavior. Is that kind of how you understand it?
Yes, I still get if I walk through the mall now and I smell Cinnabon, the memories kick in, and I won't touch it because I can easily abstain because I do it 100%. I often say this to people, 100% abstinence is easy. It is effortless because the answer is always no and never, period. I'm still going to smell that and I'm still going to say, oh my God, that smells good. And I'll giggle to myself as I walk by, and I'll even look at it and smell it. I'm never going to touch it because I know the knowledge is the power. I know what it's going to do to me. All right. It's like shooting up with heroin to a heroin addict. I know I'm screwed if I touch it, but I still light up just by smelling and looking at it. Now, did I get an insulin response by doing that? I mean, I don't know. I can't measure it. To somebody who is insulin resistant, who gives into it, I think it's a faster insulin response for them.
Got it.
I mean, we don't really know a lot of these answers unless we do studies, real specific studies.
Yeah, got it. Okay. This has already come up in the conversation about GLP-1. We know that these drugs are super popular these days. Even just today, Peter Attia did a whole episode about them in his Ask Me Anything about GLP-1s, predominantly Wegovy, Ozempic, semaglutide, kind of similar thing. So the claim is that allulose has a similar effect on GLP-1 in our body. Essentially, when you consume it, it makes you feel very satiating. And so again, the claim was you have this chocolate bar, it has allulose in it, you have one, and you're kind of good. You're done. You don't really want that much more. What did you experience as far as that goes? It didn't really sound like you were getting too satiated if you were so much looking forward to these. Well, yeah, again, did you feel satiated when you were eating some of this?
Best question of the day. They mentioned constantly in that video about the chocolate bar, some product that was made that used the allulose. I did it differently. I bought the allulose granulated in the bag. I never bought a product. I added it to things myself. I added it to pork rinds myself. I even sprinkled it on my eggs to test it to see if it made the eggs taste better. I just, I was playing around with this stuff. I felt in my gut full. It does do that. It makes you feel almost bloated, like you had a lot of beans and you almost have gas, but there's no gas. So it does work. But the brain said, oh my gosh, it's so good. And I kept eating it, even though I felt full.
Wow.
Even though I didn't want to put anything else in my stomach, I felt the stretch receptor feel, but I still said, this is so good. It didn't matter to me. And it reminded me of, before I was even on this way of eating, I would overeat and I would still overeat. Even though my body said I'm full, like Thanksgiving, I still had that dessert because I wanted that sweet thing. So my brain overrode the satiety feeling because it wanted that addictive sweetness.
That's fascinating. I was not expecting that. That's super fascinating. So what we've learned about GLP-1 is at the dose they recommend for diabetes, which I believe is Ozempic, the dose is far lower, and it works mostly in the brain by telling you that you're full. When you start to take GLP-1 for weight loss, I believe it's the same compound, but it works more in the gut, where it's actually slowing down your digestion, slowing down gut motility. Did you notice any of that? You mentioned the bloating, but did you notice any constipation, GI distress? People mentioned like belching,
Right.
food sitting in the stomach for a really long time. Could you say that you noticed any of that?
The GLP-1 effect with allulose is way smaller than it would be with Wegovy or Mounjaro or Ozempic. You know, they're giving you higher doses to really get that going. So I felt the bloating. I felt the fullness in the stomach. I don't think it slowed down my bowel movements. I really don't. I don't think I didn't have any belching or burping. It was such a small GLP-1 effect, I believe. I can't prove that. Again, you'd need to test it. It's a small amount. I mean, you and I, we get the GLP-1 effect just by intermittent fasting and doing carnivore. So you just amp that up a tiny bit with allulose, and it's just a little bit more. It's nothing like the drug Ozempic.
Yeah,
Right.
got it.
Or Wegovy, I think is even you know, it's specifically for that. Those drugs scare the living heck out of me though, because you're hearing so many negatives and side effects to artificially giving yourself so much of this GLP-1. These poor people, and it costs a fortune. I don't know why they don't just do what you and I do and get it naturally in the correct dose.
It's something I wonder about all the time because you do hear mixed. Like this is an option for some people if they want to lose weight, and people are losing weight. We don't know what the long-term effect of these things are. We might find out in the next 5 or 10 years. I've had people come on the show and say that these are safe. You need to respect them. You should eat lots of protein. You should, you know, lift weights to mitigate some of the negative side effects. And I've had other people come on and say that this is the next opioid crisis that we're going to have. And we'll find out in the next 5 or 10 years, but it's really not doing anybody any good. So it's interesting to hear, you know, your perspective on what you think about these drugs in particular. And I wonder kind of the same thing. Like, is it a bit of a rigmarole to either be prescribed the medication or to try to use things like allulose, or is it just better to avoid all of that nonsense and just eat mostly fats and proteins? And like, I feel pretty satiated. I don't have lots of cravings. I can eat a meal a day and fast the rest of the time and do everything I need to with perfect energy. Like, which one is better and which one is addressing the root cause, you know?
I don't want to say I'm all black and white with this issue. I believe that if a person has abused their body most of their life through so many different ways, and they're 400 pounds, and their life is at risk, and they've tried everything, and they just can't stop eating, this, you know, using one of these GLP-1 drugs can be a step to help them get to a certain weight, and then we, like any medicine, there should be a prescription, there should be a dose, there should be a start time, there should be a finish time, and people should learn how to eat properly. And unfortunately, I think some people are going to, of course, abuse these GLP-1 drugs, and they're not going to eat properly. They're going to think they can eat anything they want as long as they get the injection. They think it's a magic pill. And they shouldn't do that. And that's the dangerous part. You and I, we understand it because we're healthy and we're fit, we're eating properly, but some people need a little help along the way, and maybe it can be used that way if done properly. So
Okay.
that's kind of my gray answer to that. I don't want to ever rule things out completely. It can be beneficial. Now, I fear that if these type drugs start coming down in price, seriously down in price, and people can afford them more regularly, they're going to treat it like a magic pill.
Yeah.
And they're going to eat anything they want. And that scares the heck out of me.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, no one of us is a doctor or medical professional, but we make observations and we see this stuff out there. And it seems every few years something like this comes out, and it's amazing and a miracle. And like you said, like the magic pill, and it doesn't ever really seem to pan out as well. So yeah, I'm concerned about all of those same things as well. If we go back to the cephalic phase of insulin, if we understand where we would be getting our carbohydrates from in the past and natural environment, I think it helps us to understand why we have those signals inside our body that Dr. Richard Johnson writes about all the time, and why we get fat. It's like, why are we so driven to attack fructose in particular, that sweet taste? Why is it that when we get some, we want more and more and more and more? Can you explain on a natural kind of environment, the way we would have evolved, the way we live, even in very warm subtropical climates like you live in? Like, can you explain how utterly rare it would be that we would even find some of these sweet tastes in nature?
I think it's built into our body through generations, thousands of years of hunting and gathering, that when, you know, we have a kill, we eat, And then when it's not available, we go to the fruits and the berries, and we, like the bears, we eat because that's the only thing that's available, and then it gets stored as fat. It's almost like your body, instead of dying, there's a survival mode that kicks in that says, eat this. Oh my gosh, this tastes sweet. That means it's going to keep you alive. It's an instinct in the body to self-preserve. In the absence of healthy animal meats and fats, you have nothing else. Something tastes sweet for a reason. Your body says, eat it, eat it. It'll keep you alive. And that's why I think we still have this today in our modern society, with all the crap and the junk and the foods and the sugar holidays everywhere. It's still ingrained in our DNA. Something sweet is absolutely amazing and irresistible because it kept us alive in ancient times when we couldn't get the meat.
Yep.
And it's there for a reason.
That's a great point. And I think that explains why we have, made fruit the way that we make it now. Like, we have watermelons that have no seeds. Grapes don't have any seeds. I nearly broke my tooth when I was in Brazil and took a bite out of a giant grape that had a huge pit in it, because I had no idea that grapes had seeds. And that was like 20 years ago. So we want that sweet taste so much that we've changed the fruits. Like, in my neighborhood, there are a handful, very rare, a handful of fruit trees. The fruits are like crab apples or these tiny little pears. They're not what you see at the grocery store. And they're definitely not what you see at the grocery store in March or in July, all year round. In any climate you go to, you can always find a Whole Foods, and you can buy mangoes wherever you are on the planet year round that look nothing like a natural mango. We love the sweetness so much that we've even bred all these plants to give us the maximum amount of sugar with the least amount of toxins. It's quite alarming when people understand that.
And people don't also understand these fruits are picked from all over the world, not when they're ripe, so that they can be transported. By the time they get to your grocery store and they're on the shelf, they're just starting to become ripe, or they're ripe, and you think you're buying a ripe mango, a ripe tomato, whatever, and it wasn't ripe when it was picked. And when it was harvested, when it's not ripe, is when it has the most anti-nutrients in it. It has more of the lectins, the phytates, and the oxalates. If you had a tree in your yard, I have a mango tree right outside this window here. All right, that if I were to open the blinds, you'd see the leaves of the mango tree. The mangoes aren't growing on there yet. When the mangoes grow, if I let them stay on that tree until it's completely red, pinkish red, and you feel it and it's a little mushy, you know it's ripe. If I were to eat it then, it would have the least amount of anti-nutrients in it. And that's when it's supposed to be eaten. And then I don't get that many on that tree. And then that's it for the whole rest of the year. Instead of going to the grocery store and just bananas and grapes and plums and peaches and everything that's not only bred to be sweeter, but we're getting them any day of the year. And people are hearing the message, you must have so many vegetables and fruits servings in your day. And you keep hearing that message over and over again. And they even sell those darn capsules that say fruits and vegetables in the capsules. It's the message is burned in people's brains that they have to have this to be healthy. Between that and the sweet addiction that we have in the brain, I don't know how to get through to some people.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. We think that the Sprouts employee just walked back behind the store and picked your apple when you bought it. If you're listening or you're watching, Google the term birthday apple. And what you'll learn is that most apples that you find at the store are over a year old. They've been picked over a year ago. And you're right. Like, we've transported them all over the place. We picked them when they were ripe. We've got gases and different waxes and things they treat these things with so that you can buy them. If you buy one and put it on your countertop, it hardly ever seems to go bad. Where if I get like any fruit in my neighborhood, like if it stays out overnight, it's like it goes bad really, really fast. And the funny thing that you mentioned there is the fruits and vegetables, and how we lump them together also is so funny. It's fruits and vegetables. Well, vegetables are a whole nother like problem for a lot of people. This is the other part of the plant that the plant does not want to give you. The plant with the fruit is at least giving you something that tastes good ubiquitously to all of us, and it gives you a seed. So there's a kind of a mutually, kind of relationship there that is mutual. But with vegetables, now we're talking about the leaves and the stalks and the roots and all the other parts of the plant. These are the parts that are like being protected by the plant for the plant. And we just have this like really entitled kind of attitude about vegetables that we can just eat them however we want, whenever we want, all year round, when they're actively trying not to get eaten. That's a whole nother thing.
As you know, as Dr. Anthony Chafee says, plants are trying to kill you. I like the verb in there, trying, because they are bred, they can't run, they can't fight, they don't have fangs. And so they develop chemical defenses, and they really are I tell people in my videos, every single plant, even the most innocuous plant like bib lettuce, something very harmless to most people, it still has chemicals in there that are meant to protect it. The stems and the leaves and the seeds and the nuts, of course, have the highest, because they're the babies of the plants, and they want to make sure that they get to sprout and germinate, and so they have more of the phytates, lectins, and oxalates.
Yep.
Now, of course, we can go into another area here about, soaking and doing and cooking and doing all these things to get those negative things out of those plants. People do that, and that's why people have to do that. You will die if you eat beans without soaking them. The chemicals that come out of them, you can have so many of them, and you can actually be taken to the emergency room. Versus if you soak them and you cook your beans, and you're totally, you took out a lot of those lectins and phytates that are at a toxic level. We could talk about almonds, and oh my gosh, it's just on and on. We're getting off topic here, I know, but even vegetables have starch. Starch is a long string of glucose molecules. Your body breaks it down into glucose. You're still kind of getting sugar when you're eating, especially root vegetables. The other vegetables, I remember your one episode with the lady, she was the cookbook lady, I forget her name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that one, but it was a controversial one, how the fiber versus the glucose in the vegetables, and it's like a mesh and a screen, and fascinating. But I still say, why have that? Just stick to animal products, and it's simple. You don't have to worry about the oxalates. You don't have to worry about the glucose. I love how simple our way of eating is and healthy it is.
Yeah. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought up that episode. I was just thinking about that. Phoebe was her name, and she wrote a book called Carnivore. Her team asked to be on my podcast. I was like, really? Like, are you sure you want to be on a pro carnivore podcast when you wrote a book called Carnivore? And we did have a lot of points of agreement, and I tried to be non-contra, I tried not to attack her on the episode and just focus on the things that we agreed with. But my thought out of all of that was just, like you said, like practically speaking, to do what you would need to do and buy amaranth or buckwheat or all these random grains that she's explaining are the best for us. And then you have to treat them and soak them and ferment them and all of these processes. It's a lot of work. Who's going to do that? Like I've done sourdough bread before, and it's a huge pain. It's not that easy to do. And so it's like, yeah, sure. If you want to do that, go through all those processes. You can do the work of Dr. Bill Schindler. He has the Eastern Shore Food Lab, where they're making all these foods from scratch, but they go through processes that take hours, days sometimes to be able to do. You can avoid that whole thing if you like.
Exactly. Just eat a steak.
Yep.
Eat
exactly right.
Beef. Amazing. Bone broth is my one of my new favorites. I buy a lot of steaks that have the bones in them, and I do a lot of beef ribs, and my bags fill up in the freezer with the bones. I have limitless bone broth. I have so much bone broth and I do so many different things with bone broth. It's amazing. And it's healthy. Like, you have to think about the vegetables and the fruits and the sugar and then the drugs to counteract this, and all the drugs to offer people. And we have to overthink so much. People that are on diets are measuring and doing charts and weighing themselves, and all of that can be put aside if we just go back to our ancestral way and just eat 1 or 2 times a day, foods that are meant for us. It's easy, effortless.
Easy. Yeah, not complicated. Another claim that was made during this episode was that any diet, sweetener, a diet soda, for example, is better than a regular soda. Anything you can have that's not sugar, that is an artificial sweetener, is better than the sugar component. What do you think about that?
I like to use Dr. Ken Berry's phrase, less bad.
Less bad.
It is less bad. Okay. A diet soda with, what is it, aspartame is less bad. It's less bad than Coca-Cola with pure sugar in it. It's not good for you. We found out that a lot of those sugar substitutes kill off your good gut bacteria, and they also give people headaches and migraines and some mental issues, but it's less bad. So there's degrees. So to people who have to get off of soda, you start with sugar-free soda. And then you can go down from there until you eventually get to water.
Yeah.
Which is
Got
what
it.
I
Got it.
which I recommend. Yeah.
One thing I'm always curious about is what happens after the diet soda, for example. Like we talked about the cephalic phase of insulin, and like if I'm taking in something sweet, yes, maybe there's no calories, there's no sugar, but what happens when I'm tasting sweet and my body's not getting the sweet? Am I then really going to crave something very sweet that does have the sugar, and I'm going to eat that later? And thus, you know, the diet soda wasn't necessarily the problem, but it caused the cravings later down the road. Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
And it absolutely does. I mean, that's the reason they say, eventually get off of even the diet soda. Anything that is sweet, whether it's the aspartame, the Splenda, monk fruit, stevia, allulose, at least with me, I can't stop thinking about it. I want more and more and more. Even if I make myself have the fake stuff as much as I can, I still want more of the fake stuff. And that is eventually going to lead you to the real stuff. Versus if you take it all out eventually, then the urge disappears.
Yeah.
You can
Okay.
get to just the water, but
Got it.
some people have to get to it.
So is that, in your opinion, would that be where the value of something like allulose would kick in? Like, is it, yes, this is okay as a bridge and it can help step you off of that? Or is it something that you, again, with your experiment, you just didn't see so much benefit that it's just best to avoid all of it? Like, what do you think?
I think it depends on the person's personality. If you are a person who is addicted, gets highly addicted to certain things, you might want to wean down because you can't stop. Some people can just completely take everything out in one day and not think about it ever again. It depends on the person's personality. So for me to recommend you should do it this way is a little steep to think about. I think people need to realize their personality. What should I do to get off of sugar completely for the rest of my life? And for a lot of people, they can benefit by wean. You have to do some thought. You have to wean down, and sugar substitutes can be a step. It's too easy to get caught in that, and you stay with it. And people change their minds because it wants you to change your mind. You want that sweet taste. So it has to be very well thought out and use it as a way to get off. Just like smoking cessation, you have to stop. You have to wean off and eventually stop, just like an alcoholic or heroin addict. It's the same category. It's an addiction.
Yeah, I think about the book The Untethered Soul, one of my very favorite books, and makes the point that, like, to stop smoking, this is how you stop smoking. You don't put a cigarette in your mouth. It doesn't matter how you do that. You can try patches or gum or whatever, but it is guaranteed that you will stop smoking if you never put a cigarette in your mouth again. And I kind of think about this in the same way. And I just want to conclude by, again, the argument in this episode was that allulose is net positive. It was almost something that, even if you were eating a diet like you're eating, a carnivore diet, this is a net positive. You can add this into your diet and it will help you. It will lower insulin, it will lower your blood sugar, it will be satiating, it will curb cravings. And again, just to kind of recap this has not been your experience with taking an allulose. If somebody has made it on the other side of sugar addiction, they've made it to a carnivore diet, this is not something that you would say, like, yes, you should add this in and this will continually help you on your way.
Yeah, if you have already made it and you're curious, watch this video. It's not it's not worth it. It might knock you back. You may crave it. You may think about it. I walked through the store today. We have Sprouts too. They sell allulose right there. It's where I get my great pasture-raised eggs. And every time I walk by the aisle, I see it. I see it, and I bought it there. And I'm tempted to buy more still. And I know in my brain what it does. Is it a net positive? Maybe for some people. Not for me, not for addicts. For addicts, it's a slippery slope back into addiction, in my opinion. No matter how many positives they say it can give, it's not positive if it knocks you back.
Very well said. Is there anything we missed in this conversation or anything you want to reemphasize, or should that be the concluding point?
That's it. We can leave it at that. I believe addiction is something that people don't talk enough about. Whenever they're talking about the net positives of all the aspects of this way of eating, they often leave out the addiction possibility. And different people have different addiction things that get them started. Little things that spark it. So you have to know yourself and be honest and true to yourself. no matter what your addiction is. And most people have a sweet addiction. Abstinence, and I'll end with this, if you'll allow me. And I've said this before, 100% is easy. It's so easy not to have any. But when you let the tiniest little bit into your life, it's almost impossible. It's 0.1% is going to trip you up and make you fall.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point, a great way to end this conversation. I'm so grateful that both you and I have found this way of eating. We've gotten to the other side of addiction. We both have that kind of A-type drive in both of us, and the tendency to get really obsessed about things, and knowing what that's like when you put sugar in front of us. It's not pretty, and getting on the other side of that is so much more beneficial. To be 100%, I could not agree more. It's so much easier than being 99% or 95%. And you're right, maybe other people don't need to do that and they can moderate much better, but I kind of agree with you, where I think a lot more of us than we suspect are addicts, and we're best leaving all that stuff alone. So I really, really, really appreciate that you reached out. I really appreciate that you wanted to come on and provide a little bit of a different kind of message around that. I think this would be really helpful for people, John. And it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. My heart is really hoping that this week goes well for you. If I was in Florida, I'd be there filling water bags with you and trying to prevent the flooding. I hope everything goes well. But anyway, for now, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, thank you. On YouTube, I'm just Carnivore Teacher, or Carnivore Teacher 1965. From there, I post stuff on Facebook, on X, and Instagram. I try to put out a video every day from my epiphanies from your videos and other people's videos. Anything that just made sense to me, I do a little research, and I make a video to put out so I can reach other people. And I'm reaching a lot of people. I'm getting a lot of comments, and that's the whole reason I do this. I'm happy to be on. I appreciate getting to meet you and come on again for what is this, the fourth time?
Fourth time, dude.
So
Fourth
thank
time.
you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm honored.
Man, well, it's an honor to host you. I love your videos. I don't comment nearly as much as I should be. I'd love to see the comments and all the people that you're helping out there. And again, just to know that this is such a topic that, luckily for both of us, you can get obsessed with. And it seems like you can get obsessed with this for a lifetime. So I think it'll keep us both busy for quite a while. So you're doing amazing work. And I love hosting you and chatting with you. And it was a pleasure to meet you in person. And thank you so very much for all the work that you do. And thank you for coming on our show today. We really appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.